Welcome back, everybody, to the 423 Football Podcast. Today is our first Monday show of the off-season. We're recording this on Sunday, so technically it's Sunday right now. But you're listening to this on Monday. This is going to be the new, routine for us throughout the off-season. We're going to be recording on Sundays, releasing on Mondays, and still bringing you all of the fantasy knowledge you could ever want. So today, I know we've been since the playoffs have been, keeping us occupied for the past couple weeks. We're finally getting back into the fantasy groove here. So today is our 2017 Fantasy Football Award Show. This is going to be a big one. I don't know about you, but this is probably going to be one of my favorite episodes we've done so far. Yeah, we were talking about the people that really excited or really, crapped out your teams. Yeah.
So it's usually, it's good to know at the end of the season where everyone finished up and what we think was the best and the worst.
Yep, and as always, Brett Hamilton is here with me.
Hello.
I'm Brandon Bouchard. You like how I switched up the names there?
Nah, I don't even know. I think I'm going to have to leave.
You didn't even know who you were there for a second.
Brett.
We got it. It's been too long for us to forget now. 2017 fantasy football awards. We've been putting it off for a while, and I'm ready to get into it. So before we dive straight on into it, we'll talk a little bit of news, a lot of head coaching things going on right now, some free agency news, contracts, trades, things like that. So first things first, Josh McDaniels does a complete 180 by deciding to turn down the Colts head coaching job and return to the Patriots as the offensive coordinator. What do you make of this?
I mean,
there are a lot of the mixed opinions.
I thought it was pretty much a done deal. I don't know.
It's basically like
I don't know what fell through.
I'm trying to think who said it. I think it was maybe Colin Cowherd said it's basically like a high school recruit verbally committing, and then he didn't actually sign the commitment letter yet. But there's no. I don't understand how there couldn't be like the words head coach mentioned to McDaniels when talking with Robert Kraft, because why on earth would you go back? Because one, you really aren't that big of a necessity for the Patriots because they have Tom Brady, because they have Bill Belichick. Yeah. He's not as important as Patricia. So I guess just maybe being comfortable with him or just having a nice routine with him, but he's got to be. If he's not the next head coach, I don't understand. And
that would be
and granted,
no
I'm not
for that.
I'm not the biggest fan of Josh McDaniels anyway. We've seen him try to coach up a football team in the past, the Broncos, and failed miserably.
Yeah.
So he's really only had success as a coordinator under Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just see how that plays out. He'll be in New England for the time being. Now, speaking of the Colts, this just broke today. Colts have hired Frank Reich as head coach on a 5-year deal. Frank Reich, obviously the offensive coordinator, or former offensive coordinator of the Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
So obviously,
very good hire.
Pretty much that one game gave him the head coaching job, and all year really he's been fantastic.
Yeah, all year I've been, you've been impressed with the Eagles' offense. You have to be. They won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that says it all. He'll be the new head coach, I think, or that's the last of the head coaching vacancies, so we're all filled up now. It's just waiting on the season to start and see what these head coaches can do.
Yep.
Now, back to the Patriots, I do want to mention Rob Gronkowski retirement rumors might actually have some weight to them, according to Monday Morning Quarterbacks Albert Breer. So, I don't know. It's just another one of those, you see a guy he's not that young. He's getting up there, especially for tight ends, and a guy who's had a lot of back issues. And
he just gets hurt every season. I think that has to be the biggest issue for him, especially with being back injuries. That can really, that can devastate the rest of your life if you've got something like that going on. But You know, when I first got the sleeper bot notification, the very first time he came out and said, you know, he was giving some thought to retirement, I just dismissed it as, you know, just talking.
Yeah.
But no, apparently there's some merit. Kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, we'll just see how that plays out. Again, it's just one of those things. They're gonna go, or Gronk's gonna go and talk with all the people close to him and be like, think out what the next step in his just not career, but just life in general. Maybe outside of football. Two more things. Jimmy Garoppolo signed a 5-year, $137.5 million contract with the 49ers, making him the highest paid NFL player in history on an average annual value. That I can understand it. I mean, obviously they're all in. John Lynch is all in on Jimmy Garoppolo. 49ers are all in on Jimmy Garoppolo. And I mean, what we've seen from him as a starter has been, I mean, spectacular. It's just...
Yeah. Well, you have to think there's a lot of quarterbacks out there that are up for, or almost up for contract extensions. Like Aaron Rodgers, it'll be next year.
It's it's the carousel.
And it's going to be. I mean, he's the highest paid right now, but he's not going to be soon.
I understand that, but I mean, just from a perspective of we've only seen him really play or start half a season.
Yeah.
As a starting quarterback, and again, he's been great in those games, but
he proved he could get it done.
The question is going to be whether that was enough to warrant this kind of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was.
I mean, I have a lot more confidence in this deal than we saw in the past with Matt Flynn and Brock Osweiler and players like that. This one's definitely a better. I
think that looks much brighter than those players.
Oh, yeah. And then last thing, Alex Smith. I don't think we ever talked about this, but Alex Smith traded to the Washington Redskins from the Chiefs. I don't really understand why the Redskins did that. I mean, sure, you're getting a slightly better... Actually, maybe that's basically a lateral move, in my opinion, in terms of quarterback value. But the cap space is freed up for the Chiefs, and obviously Mahomes is going to be their guy for the future. I think it's a great move for the Chiefs. Don't really understand it for the Redskins. Obviously, Kirk Cousins isn't going to be there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the bottom line is they're dishing him out.
There was some report about them actually still wanting to franchise tag him.
Oh, my gosh.
I don't you are basically an indentured servant.
Yeah.
Like, you can't leave. It's just,
No, that's
terrible. He could
terrible.
just not sign it and then basically sit out, but...
No, he's going somewhere. There's just no way.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in the coming weeks when we get into free agency. So, that's all the news. You ready to get into it? Awards season.
I am ready.
Fantasy football awards. Now, just remember, these aren't like the football honors like Tom Brady winning MVP or comeback player of the year, things like that. I mean, they kind of correlate, but... we have 7 awards to give out. We each picked one. We went back and forth, so we're not going to overlap this time. I know in the past when we've picked players, we kind of overlapped on some of them, but this time we got 7 awards. We got Rookie of the Year, Mr. Consistent, Waiver Wire Add, Underappreciated Award, Breakout Player, Bust of the Year, and last but not least, MVP. So we'll just go through them one by one, and hope you guys enjoy this. Rookie of the Year. Who you got?
Well, I think it's just a given now.
You had the first pick for this one.
Yeah,
so.
It's also the offensive rookie of the year. Alvin Kamara, just a monster. Just came out of nowhere and really took New Orleans' run game to the next level in a way that we haven't seen in the past because it's always been Drew Brees throwing bombs because that's what he does, and he's good at it.
Yeah.
But this was a whole different Saints team, and a lot of that stemmed from Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Just a great duo. But just to give you an idea, 5 receiving touchdowns, that's huge for fantasy football.
Especially for running backs,
yes. And he can get it done on the ground. He can get it done through the air. He had 10 games this season with over 50 receiving yards. And most of those were like a lot more than 50.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few like 122, 100 yards. I mean, combined yards, he was pushing like 200 on multiple games. Just insane.
Yeah.
Just a touchdown monster. 5 receiving touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns. get it done either way. And for a rookie to come out and do that, really a rookie that was on not a lot of people's radar, just really impressive.
Yeah, he went undrafted in a lot of leagues, so definitely.
Yeah. That would have been a good waiver wire pickup.
And again, my guy, obviously I was going to go with Kamara. It was very, very close, but my guy, my rookie of the year, Kareem Hunt, finished as the running back 3 on the season, 1,327 yards, 11 total touchdowns, added another 465 receiving yards. And again, the 13-27 that led the league in rushing. Yep. And the best part about him and Kamara were that they were either drafted really, really late in most scenarios. Obviously, a Kareem Hunt, once it got closer to the season and we knew Spencer Ware was not going to be playing, his value went up a little bit. But still...
In our league, he went late.
yeah, he did. But yeah, finished number 3 running back, and that's in standard, by the way. Had obviously started off the season with the 40-point week 1. I think that was the highest for a running back all year. No, it wasn't. Todd Gurley had. I think he had that 45, I believe. Yep. But yeah, only 1 fumble on the year. It was the very first touch of his NFL career. Had the fumble, didn't fumble again after that. Kareem Hunt was. I mean, he supported my team throughout the year because I'm always struggling with running back selections, and if it wasn't for him, I'd probably be. I probably wouldn't have even made the playoffs. In all honesty, but yeah, Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara. Those are our 2 picks for Rookie of the Year. Just a few honorable mentions that did not make our picks, but Juju Smith-Schuster had a fantastic rookie year. He came on big at the wide receiver position. Probably the only really premier rookie at a wide receiver we saw this year. Obviously, Corey Davis was up and down. Mike Williams was hurt pretty much all year. John Ross hurt pretty much all year. So those rookie receivers never really got going. Leonard Fournette, I mean, you got to mention him. Yeah. If it wasn't for Kamara and Hunt, I mean, he's right up there with them, just nipping at their heels.
Yeah.
And Deshaun Watson, if it wasn't for him getting hurt, I think, honestly, I have no doubt in my mind we'd be talking about him as Rookie of the Year right now. Maybe even league MVP. He was leading the league in passing touchdowns before he got injured. So, yeah, got to give a shout-out to all of those guys for almost getting on our awards list.
Almost. The next award we got is Mr. Consistency. This is one I like. You know, we always like to have... We talk about the high-risk, high-reward players, but I like the consistency players, the ones that you can count on day in and day out to get it done. And so my pick was DeAndre Hopkins. I had him at... I traded for him mid-season, so
yes, you did.
Obviously, I traded him away actually, which paid off for me. But I really didn't want to get rid of him because he was so consistent.
You traded him for Gurley. I think that's okay.
Exactly. That's why I'm not. That's why I'm not upset about it. But in terms of consistency, he had 11 games out of the 16 that he played. He scored more than 10 points in standard scoring.
Yeah.
That is what I'm talking about. That is consistency.
That's fantastic. And not to mention with 2 different quarterbacks.
He had a carousel of quarterbacks. Deshaun, obviously, he played the best when Deshaun Watson was quarterback.
I am so ready to see that again.
Yeah,
I am so ready.
That duo was scary. I mean, he had a 28-point game, 23-point game, and then, the big injury.
Yeah.
Really set him back, but...
And again, all these numbers are standard, unless we say so otherwise.
Yeah, that's what we play in our league. But yeah, it's just from a consistency standard, that to me was what I like to see. And unfortunately, it didn't finish the year on my team, but I was fine.
I'm going with Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz was again one of my guys all year, but finished as the number 3 tight end in fantasy behind Gronk and Kelsey. Missed 2 games, so if it wasn't for those 2 games that he missed, I think he'd definitely be up there. Anyway, 824 yards on the season, 8 touchdowns. But what makes him Mr. Consistent, 8 straight, the first 8 weeks, I should say, 8 straight weeks with at least 80 yards or a touchdown. You get that from a tight end, that is just absurd numbers. That is exactly what you want from a tight end. They're not... Obviously, tight ends are usually just completely up and down. You don't know what's going to happen. But
most of the time they were this year.
If you can get that solid tight end, you are golden. Yeah. Obviously, he got injured about week 11, I think, and kind of started to fall off a little bit. But again, I believe he had 20-point week somewhere in there towards the end of the season, and
that's what you want to see from a tight end.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
And I just wanted a piece of that Eagles offense, and I thought Zach Ertz was definitely the best piece of that offense. And we saw it in the Super Bowl. He just, Mr. Consistent, just keeps on rolling.
Yep. Just throw it to me in the end zone. It's a touchdown.
Yep. A few honorable mentions. Melvin Gordon, only 4 games under 10 points this year. I know a few of those games, I think he had like 2 or 3 points, which...
Yeah, they were real stinkers.
Yeah, those weren't too great, but for the most part, very, very consistent on the season. Yeah. And Alex Smith, surprisingly, showed that he can actually open up the offense and make throws down the field, and it paid off, especially having Tyreek Hill there to open it up and Kareem Hunt. And Alex Smith had a very, very fine fantasy season. I think he was top 8 quarterbacks on the year. So Alex Smith, close but no cigar on Mr. Consistent. All right, Waiver Wire Add. Who you got? Waiver Wire Add of the year.
And waiver wire ads are going to be different for every league. You got these really deep leagues. If you're in like a 12-person league, probably didn't get a whole lot off the waiver wire.
Yeah.
But mine, I went with Robert Woods. And it's really unfortunate that he missed 3 games in kind of his prime. Most likely when people started to pick him up was around week 5 or 6. And after that he scored 6 points. But then he scored that 19 and 29. That 29-point game that you got off the waiver wire, that probably won you your week.
Oh, yeah.
and that's right mid-season where you're trying to make the playoff push. And then you had the string of 3 games where you couldn't play. But then he came back and got you 10 points the week he came back.
Yep. Helped knock me out of the playoffs.
Yes, he did. So, barring, unfortunately we had to sit out for 3 weeks, but other than that, I think that was a really good waiver wire ad for people about mid-season.
Yeah, my guy, waiver wire ad for me, Chris Thompson. Pretty much on nobody's radar going into the season. We thought there was... The running back rumors for the Redskins were just all over the place. You had Rob Kelly, you had Samaje Perine, and really no one could stay healthy on that team in general. Yeah. But Chris Thompson, when you were able to pick him up, and actually before he got injured again, obviously horrific injury. Horrific leg injury, and that hurts this, I guess, award a little bit. But from week 11 or from week 1 to week 11. He was number 12 running back in standard, number 10 in PPR. That is outstanding off the waiver wire, without question. He was getting receiving touchdowns left and right, making big plays. Mm-hmm. He was looking like really Kareem Hunt was there for a while, just scoring every time he got the ball. Yep. So Chris Thompson, I believe Joseph picked him up in our league, and that was one of his premier running backs there for a while. Yeah,
until he got hurt. He was really carrying his team. He got a lot of good wins off his back.
Yeah, Chris Thompson getting my award there for waiver wire ad. A few honorable mentions. Juju Smith-Schuster. I know I mentioned him in the rookie category, but Juju, obviously, he was no one thought about him really. Other than as maybe like a really late flyer or in deeper leagues, but he definitely paid off late in the season. Alex Collins, again, running back carousel in Baltimore. Alex Collins emerged as the number 1 there. Great waiver wire pickup. Jerick McKinnon, I thought was a notable one to add. He was completely out of people's minds because we saw Dalvin Cook there for a while, and then Latavius Murray was the next guy, and then Jerick McKinnon decided to show up. So Jerick McKinnon, another waiver wire ad. Okay, or you're introducing this one, aren't you?
Yep. The next award we got up is the Underappreciated. This is for all the guys that kind of flew under the radar, but they performed a lot better than what the press gave them credit for. Yeah. They're maybe not the flashiest of players, but they're the ones that you wanted to have on your team, and we want to make sure that they get the credit that they deserve. My pick for the underappreciated player was Devontae Adams, wide receiver on the Green Bay Packers.
Go Pack.
I'm sure Brandon knows.
Got Packers.
A lot of people say, and I like this one because he is another one of those wide receivers that had to suffer through a devastating quarterback loss mid-season or early season, I guess. What week was that? I was trying to look. It's probably week 6 or 7.
It was. I think it was 7. I believe they were 4-3 at the time.
Okay, so yeah, about mid-season. But I don't want to take that I don't want to use that against him, saying that he only performed better once, or he only continued to perform better whenever Aaron Rodgers went down. Because even before that, he went to Atlanta, got 16 points. He put up 18 points on the Cowboys. So he was getting it done, even with Jordy there, even with a healthy Aaron Rodgers. And then once the Aaron Rodgers injury happened, he didn't fall off. He was one of the few Packers players that you could rely on throughout the season.
He was sustainable, yeah.
Yeah, he was the only one that you didn't have to dish off. Like Jordy, that was a real issue after that injury because he wasn't doing anything. He didn't do anything after Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Unfortunately, he couldn't develop that chemistry with Brett Hundley. But you could rely on Davante Adams. Not the flashiest of players, but he was definitely a solid pick going forward.
Yeah. Do you think? It might have happened already this year, but do you think, like, especially with the Davante getting his new contract, obviously what he did this year, aided in that. But do you think now that Davante Adams, when Aaron's back, and assuming Jordy's back and Randall's back, assuming they keep all these guys, do you think Davante Adams has emerged as the number one, like the go-to guy for Aaron?
Well, yeah.
Because Jordy was still blowing up before Aaron. I mean, he was still arguably a top 10 wide receiver before Aaron went down.
Oh, absolutely. I think if I was going to pick one for next year, I would pick Davante Adams, but I know with Jordy there that he's going to... the chemistry that Jordy Nelson and Aaron Rodgers have is just undeniable. I mean, they just know. Like somehow, he just always catches this long bomb touchdown. They're the only two players on the field on the same page, and it just works. So you're going to get those games from Jordy from a consistency and just game in and game out. I think you're going to find better numbers from Davante Adams next year.
Yeah, and again, if Aaron's out there can easily be 3 guys on
Randall
this team.
Cobb might be really good next year.
If Aaron stays healthy and everyone stays healthy, there's 3 guys can be supported from the wide receiver position on this team, so don't fear from that. And I think in the early average draft positions, I know the season just ended.
Very early.
Yeah, very, very early. But I think Davante's going a couple rounds ahead of Jordy.
And I would think that was going to hold true through the offseason.
Yeah, which I'm perfectly fine with. I would love to take Jordy in those late rounds. Cause
he would be a late round steal.
Well, he's been a top 2 pick, or I think top 2 round pick for me in 2 or 3 straight years now. Yeah. So heck, I made the trade at the beginning of the year. Kevin picked Jordy in the first round, and I traded I traded the pick and my 7th round pick for Jordy,
which is exactly why Kevin picked Jordy. But
honestly, if before the injury happened, it was going fine for me.
It was.
AJ Green didn't have that great of a season, and Kevin, I think with the other pick I traded to him, got Sammy Watkins. So cool. I have no problem with that. I have no regrets on making that trade.
Nope.
My underappreciated player of the year is Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry,
the juice.
Yeah, I've been very critical of him in the past just because he gets the targets, he gets a lot of receptions. The yardage has never really been there. The touchdowns definitely haven't been there.
No, that's been the biggest issue for fantasy.
Yeah, especially for a number 1 wide receiver. But this year, this is a year, contract year. Obviously, he's gonna start going off. Wide receiver 14 in standard, finished with 987 yards, 9 touchdowns on 161 targets, 112 receptions. All of those, besides the yardage, are career highs for Jarvis Landry. And, the 9 touchdowns, that's what blew me away, because his previous high was 5, and we've never really looked at him as, and that was his rookie year, we never really looked at Jarvis as a touchdown guy, but this year really changed, and I don't know if it was, he had again, we just have rotating quarterbacks. We had Jay Cutler out there, Matt Moore. You could I mean, Jarvis Landry had everything pretty much against him this year. He didn't have a solid quarterback like he had in Tannehill. Now, I don't know how solid you could say Ryan Tannehill has been in his career, but Jarvis Landry is obviously going to make some big bucks this offseason. And I'm looking forward to talking where his landing spots are going to be. We'll talk about that in the coming weeks. But yeah, Jarvis Landry, that's my underappreciated player. A few honorable mentions. Mark Ingram. I know everyone just puts Alvin Kamara in the spotlight at the moment, and rightly so, no problem with that. But Mark Ingram kind of always gets just left in the dust, and he's an incredible running back. He produces every single year if he stays healthy. And again, he does it this year on the same roster as Alvin Kamara. 2 running backs doing that is outstanding to me. Yeah. And Mark Ingram, I kind of
by far the best running back duo this year.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And one more, Julio Jones. He finished as the number 6 wide receiver in standard, so you're kind of thinking, why was he underappreciated? Because every single week, I think, other than maybe one, Julio was just being trashed by everybody, saying like, oh, he's not scoring touchdowns, he's not doing this, he's not doing that. He, I think, was 3rd in the league in receiving yards, finished as the wide receiver number 6, and people are still hating on the guy. I mean, I understand
he didn't live up to Julio standards.
Well,
that's the real issue that people
have. I understand that, and honestly, he hasn't. Because of his size, because of his speed, because of what he is, he could be Calvin Johnson, who plays for a reasonable amount of time and stays somewhat healthy. I know Julio's had his injury problems, but Julio is one of the most athletically gifted wide receivers we've ever seen play this sport. And that's why I think people kind of see what he's doing and is like, oh, why isn't it more?
And I think the biggest problem was he probably lost a lot of teams' weeks because he did pretty well. I mean, obviously, he finished as the number 6, but he wasn't nearly as consistent as some of the other wide receivers. I mean, he had multiple games under 5 points. That would have lost. I mean, most likely that was your first wide receiver taken.
Oh yeah.
So that's not what you want from number 1 wide receiver.
He's no Mr. Consistent DeAndre Hopkins.
No, I mean, week 1 straight out of the gate 6 points. Week 4 3 points. 10 5 points. 13 2 points. I mean, he had a lot of just duds, and I think that's what was getting people riled up. Is okay. If you're not scoring the touchdowns, you got to get the yards.
Yeah. All right. Breakout player of the year for fantasy. Who are you going with?
Well, I'm going with who I thought could have taken the real league MVP, Carson Wentz. North Dakota tough Carson Wentz. Even without the last 3 games played, I still think he had a legitimate claim to league MVP.
Oh yeah, he was my pick without question.
I mean, the stats are incredible. Obviously, you either had to be hiding under a rock to not notice what this guy was doing. But he got injured in week 14. But before that, I mean, he didn't have a game under 15 points. Which, in my opinion, if you're a quarterback, you have to get more than 15 points to be competitive in your week.
Yeah,
when your weekly matchup.
20 is what I always shoot for.
Yeah.
But
he had plenty of games over 20 points. But the biggest thing is this was his second year in the league. Yards were pretty comparable. He was on pace for more than 4,000 passing yards, which would have been great. But last year, 16 passing touchdowns. This year, 33 passing touchdowns. That is huge.
Double it.
Double it in less games. That's monstrous.
Yeah.
And he did it on way less attempts. It's just everything. It was like a complete 360. He just stepped up his game this year. And obviously, he still got a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, that he did.
But they would not. I mean, no doubt in my mind. He's the reason they had the playoff bye to begin with.
Yep.
They were the number one seed because of him, and I don't want to take that don't want to take any credit away from him just because he didn't finish the season and win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. My breakout player of the year, Adam Thielen. I've been raving about this man all year. You can put him in any of these categories for in my
Rookie of the year.
Rookie of the year, give it to him. No one's really heard of him until this year, so give him Rookie of the year.
He might as well be a rookie.
Yeah, just throw him. But, I mean, you could put Mr. Consistent, Waiver Wire Add, because he wasn't drafted very high.
Yeah.
Underappreciated early on, yeah. But for the breakout, I will say Adam Thielen. Finishes wide receiver 11 in standard. 1,276 yards. Only 4 touchdowns, but...
Yeah.
I mean, 4 touchdowns. I kind of expected more than that from him, but he's doing it with Case Keenum, who we didn't really know much.
Yeah.
We didn't really think this was going to happen with him all year.
Well, he had 3 quarterbacks that he never knew who was going to play the next week.
Very true, very true. But the crazy number for me, 142 targets.
Yeah.
Most by a Minnesota wide receiver since Randy Moss in 2003.
And Randy Moss was good.
People say he was good. I guess that's why he's in the Hall of Fame now.
First ballot Hall of Fame. Yep.
Yeah. But Adam Thielen. I know I compared him to Jordy early in the season.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison.
Yeah, saying that he just for some reason he was looked at and just overlooked, and no one really saw what his talent was.
Yeah.
But then he got a chance. He got a chance to be a number 1 wide receiver, and he just took it and blew up with it. The guy has incredible hands, incredible ball skills. He's incredibly smart, super fast, just like Jordy. Sideline awareness, everything. I could go on and on.
And even when Stephon Diggs was playing, he still did well. I mean, it's not just like it was dependent on a Stephon Diggs injury. Like, no, he's just really good all the time.
Yeah. And not to mention, I mean, Adam Thielen drafted, I believe, 10th round was his ADP.
Yeah.
So if you were able to snag a wide receiver 1 in the 10th round, that's absolutely incredible.
Pretty good. Yeah, the next one is the one we don't want to put in. We don't want to put a lot of people in.
No, Adam Thielen does not belong in this.
This is the one. He can go in Rookie of the Year, but he cannot go in this category. This is the bust category. This is the one that people don't like because these are the players that you had such high expectations for, and they just did nothing but let you down this whole season. And my player, he let you down all season. Just except for one game.
One game.
His one claim to fame.
Can you guess?
His one claim to fame was one game.
Yep.
But it was a 33-point game, so that was pretty awesome. If you haven't guessed it by now, Amari Cooper. I had such high expectations. I thought he would be doing so much better this year. Just something was just wrong the whole season. He had 8 games with less than 5 points in standard scoring.
Ugh.
I mean... And the problem is you believe in the guy's talent. You know he can do it, but you still don't want to. And for that reason, you don't want to bench him. So you had fantasy players all year playing this guy, expecting something, and getting 0.8 points every week. I mean, it was just trash.
Raiders were a mess just all year, especially in fantasy.
I don't want to put it all on him. I mean, he had a lot of drops, and that was a big issue. Of just dropping the ball, and that happens. I understand that, but the Raiders were a kind of a mess. They didn't know what was going on. Hopefully next year will be a little bit better for them. Yep. But Amari Cooper really let me down.
I still think.
Luckily, I didn't have him in any leagues. I couldn't get him.
I still think the hype this next year is going to be about the same as it was at the beginning of this year, where it's like this is going to be the year where Amari breaks out because we're waiting for it. He has the talent. We've seen it before.
Yeah,
but I don't.
Is he going to break out though?
I don't know. But
is it all just in our heads at this point?
Maybe we need to get it out of our heads. But hey, John Gruden, Amari Cooper, it's time, baby. It's time. It's going to be this. That's going to be the arguments all offseason. They're going to be like, okay, Amari's, you got to take him as a top 15 wide receiver, maybe top 10, and this is going to be the year it happens. And maybe it will, maybe it won't, but we'll see when the time comes.
Yeah, and he might be terrible week 1, and John Gruden just benches him for the whole year.
Oh yeah, that's definitely going to happen. All right, my bust of the year, which I think was probably going to be everyone's bust.
Yeah.
Terrell Pryor.
He was number 1 on my list.
Terrell Pryor. I think we had him picked in when we were breaking down the bust for each division.
Yeah.
Or in
I
conference.
think we did like a mid-season.
Yeah, I think we
kind
did.
of ranking for letdown.
Yeah, I need to look back at the scripts that we have and see what we put for our award picks or predictions and stuff like that.
One thing we know for sure, there's not a lot of positive comments about Terrell Pryor this year.
No, definitely not. Terrell Pryor finished as wide receiver. Go ahead and guess. What wide receiver he finished as.
82.
No, you're going to keep going. Keep going.
112.
112 is right.
Oh, is it really?
Right on the dot.
Wow.
Right on the dot. 112. Wide receiver, 112.
Huh.
Average draft position was 3rd round.
Wow.
3rd round. I was one of the biggest proponents of not drafting Terrell Pryor that early because, one, he's not a receiver. I didn't touch him that early. He's not a receiver.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the biggest downfall of fantasy projections going in. I just think we underestimated the amount of skill that wide receivers have. I mean, these elite wide receivers spend their whole lives practicing this position.
Oh, yeah.
You can't go from running back to wide receiver in a season and expect to be a 3rd round wide receiver.
Yeah,
it just doesn't happen.
It's completely different than what he did in Cleveland because he was going from the Wildcat. He was playing quarterback some games. Yeah. He was literally the only player that they threw the ball to because Corey Coleman he was hurt basically the entire year. So Terrell Pryor in Cleveland is a completely different monster than what he would be, especially on the Redskins where they want him to just be a deep threat and like I don't know, just another weapon for Kirk Cousins. No.
Just didn't happen.
It clearly did not work out. And he did get hurt, so he only played 9 games, but not 20.
By that point, you were benching him anyway.
Oh, yeah, without question. 20 catches, 240 yards, and a touchdown. That's what he had on the season. Just to put that in perspective, Julio, as we were talking about before, he had 1 game with 253 yards and 2 touchdowns. He outproduced Terrell Pryor in 1 game than Terrell Pryor did in 9. So
that's bad.
And another thing that I said the ADP was 3rd round. He was drafted according to ADP in front of guys like these are just wide receivers. I could go on and on about running backs and other players. But drafted in front of Tyreek Hill, finished as a top 10 wide receiver. Devontae Adams, who we mentioned earlier, Larry Fitzgerald, Stephon Diggs, Jarvis Landry. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Adam Thielen, obviously.
That's why I always emphasize, especially during drafts, do not take risks that early because they can come back to bite you, and when they do, it's really, really, really bad.
That's
Clearly
true.
here.
Yeah.
Obviously, however, I will say Matt was the one who picked Terrell Pryor this year, and Matt happened to win it all. Somehow he got Fournette in a very, very favorable trade, and that really helped him win the league. But
yes, he did.
Terrell Pryor, even though he's my bust of the year, did not really affect Matt that much.
Nope.
Okay, here we go. This is the big one. MVP, most valuable fantasy player of the year, and just so you know, it's not just the guy who scored the most points. However, I think our 2 picks did happen to score the most points. But, I mean, that's very rare. I will say it's mainly based on the fact of where they were drafted because our 2 picks really weren't drafted as high as, like, other guys like Le'Veon Bell or Antonio Brown, which those guys could easily be in MVP discussions as well. But just because they didn't add as much value, you can't really put them up there. So, MVP, you want to kick it off? Who you got as your fantasy football MVP?
This just hands down. This is, you've probably heard of him before. He stole the fantasy limelight this year. Todd Gurley, the heart and soul of the Rams offense this year, just blew people away. I can't even fathom how good he was this whole year. And talk about consistency. He had 1 game this whole season with less than 10 points.
That's incredible.
I mean, that's
David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell. Esque.
That's why you draft Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson.
Yeah.
That's really, really hard to do. I mean, and one of my favorite things about Todd Gurley this year is so many people doubted him.
Oh, yeah.
Because, and fair enough, the Rams were awful last year, but that's because of the coaching. That's because of a lot of reasons, but most of it had to do with coaching.
Old Jeff Fisher.
Jeff Fisher could not get it done. So you come in with a really exciting young coach and Sean McVay, completely 180s the team, and it all centers around Todd Gurley being amazing. And he is one of the very few that has no one behind him. I mean, you're talking about like a Le'Veon Bell type where there is no second running back taking carries.
Yep.
Which is a big problem, which is, you talk about their running back committees, that's a huge problem for fantasy owners nowadays. But he was the best. I mean, there's just not a whole lot to say.
He was the best. Again, he had as we hinted to before or earlier, had the 45-point game that really, I think that was that week 15 or 16?
It was 15 against the Seahawks, which, ironically enough, his one game with less than 10 points was against the Seahawks. Yeah, I remember that because he had that fumble out of the end zone, I believe. Yeah.
Which I thought was a touchdown, but
yeah,
I'm not getting into that. But yeah, I mean, Todd Gurley. I haven't looked at the percentage of teams that had or fantasy football championship teams that had Todd Gurley on them, but I guarantee he's in the top 5 in that percentile.
And talking about finishing strong, you're talking about week 15. With the his season high 42 points. He followed it up with week 16 with 39.6 points against Tennessee.
Yeah, he without question won me our the Chefs League.
Oh,
definitely.
No.
Definitely won that league for me. I do want to say because of the value, he wasn't drafted as a top 3 running back. He wasn't even drafted as a top 5 running back. Right. He was drafted as the number 10 overall running back. 9 guys went in front of him, and Todd Gurley finished with, I believe, or he was the only running back in the top 10 in standard leagues for just fantasy points. The rest are quarterbacks, which is what you normally see. So yeah, Todd Gurley finished, I believe, 30 points above any other running back, and finished as the number 2 overall player in fantasy.
And didn't play week 17.
Very, very good point. Okay, my guy. The guy who had the most fantasy points this year. And again, I usually don't like putting quarterbacks on MVP radar, but I just think he was still a little overlooked. Aaron Rodgers was going in front of him. Brady was going in front of him a lot of places. Breeze was going in front of him. There were people vying for Matt Ryan in front of him. Andrew Luck was even going in front of him before the shoulder injury really flared up.
Right.
But Russell Wilson is my MVP of this fantasy football year. 347.92 fantasy points. That led everyone. And again, him and Gurley, only 2 players over 300 points in standard this year. Finished with 3,983 yards, 34 touchdowns, which led the league, 11 interceptions, which was that tied a career high for Russell Wilson. But his defense, he had to kind of force things because his defense was just falling flat on their face this year.
Yeah,
and no running game as well.
Yeah, that whole team's kind of in trouble now. But.
Yeah, but and not to mention 3 rushing touchdowns, I believe, over 500 rushing yards.
Which is what you really like.
Yeah, and I know we talked about last week, we were talking about the actual MVP, Tom Brady winning the MVP, and we were mentioning Carson Wentz and Gurley taking the MVP over Brady, but I don't know why we failed to mention Russell Wilson should definitely be in the consideration. I don't know if he would have topped Brady per se, but almost 4,000 passing yards, had more passing touchdowns, I believe 3 or 4 more interceptions than Brady, clearly more rushing yards than Brady, and rushing touchdowns. And again, Russell Wilson, his team was in pretty much shambles. It was him and a few receivers that really stuck with the Seahawks the entire year. So Russell Wilson, without question, my fantasy MVP. And he won, again, he was very, very consistent all year. Yeah. He won a lot of people leagues late in the season. Russell Wilson was a phenomenal fantasy football asset this year.
Yep.
I failed to mention the breakout and bust honorable mentions, but we'll just go by those. We'll just
You know who the busts are.
you
dropped them.
Yeah, you know who they are. They no longer reside. They're in the fantasy graveyard.
Yeah, fantasy graveyard.
But close but no cigar on MVP. DeAndre Hopkins, I think you got to mention. Antonio Brown, as we mentioned before, and Le'Veon Bell.
Of course.
But again, these guys, not so much. I think I would have put DeAndre Hopkins as MVP over Antonio or Le'Veon. Not just because of points, but because of where they were drafted. Le'Veon, Antonio, arguably they were 1-2 in drafts. DeAndre Hopkins, he was falling to third and fourth round in a lot of drafts. So that was a
definitely a good later round.
Yeah, very good value. Now, you mentioned Gurley as your MVP, and obviously Russell is my MVP. Now, it's a little bit different with quarterbacks, but where do you see Gurley being drafted next year overall?
I mean, I would say, he's got to be top 3.
Yeah,
it's going to be down to Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, and Todd Gurley, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to put Zeke in there as well. I have no problem with that.
Zeke may go in front of David Johnson just because the Cardinals' offense is going to look different. You never know.
And coming off the injury. So.
I'm not going to doubt David Johnson.
No, neither am I. As long as they get a somewhat formidable quarterback. Just somewhat, because I think it's still going to run through David Johnson regardlose.
Yeah, it has to. He's the most talented player on that team. But
again, we'll dive into that later in the offseason. Before we close out the show, I want to give schedule update, because we're kind of all over the place at the moment. We're trying to get our idea of how we're going to proceed through the offseason. So, what I think we're going to do... Obviously, we're going to keep dropping these on Monday. That's going to be consistent. The content, however, I think the next 3 to 4 weeks, I guess month or so, we're going to talk just free agents. We're going to talk everything. We're going to rank our top free agents on the year. We're going to give you some predictions on where they might end up. And hopefully, obviously, free agency is coming up pretty quick. So we're going to be talking, give you updates on where they go, how it's going to fit into the offenses and things like that. And again, when we're talking free agents, we are just going to be talking offensive free agents. We're not going to dabble into the defensive side of it because, again, we are a fantasy football show, and I know a lot of people do independent defensive players every now and then. We're not really about that. That's just kind of hectic. But, so for the time being, we're going to talk free agents, and then once we're done with that, we're going to start getting into draft season, and we're going to start talking draft prospects, see where they could possibly end up in the league, and give you maybe some mock drafts here and there. But, so that is going to be the show for today. Hope you guys enjoyed the Fantasy Football Awards. Send us or tweet us at the423football. Tweet us who you thought should be picked as the MVP or Mr. Consistent or Rookie of the Year or whoever. Or if you got an award to make up, go ahead and send us that as well. But, definitely make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the423football. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. Give us a like. Leave your comments and reviews. And more importantly than anything, give us retweets. Share us. Like us. Make sure everyone you know is aware that we exist. Because we're here. We're giving you content. We're here year-round to give you fantasy football content and knowledge, everything you could think of. I know it's going to be, we got a good 250 days or something like that until football actually starts, which is going to be, it kills me.
Every year it's awful.
Every year, and I feel like it's going to start even sooner because we're going to be talking about this year-round.
Yeah.
And maybe baseball season will help distract us there for a little while.
Maybe we can just go ahead and draft.
Maybe I'm done. Maybe next week, or we'll give you a bonus episode one of these weeks, and we'll just go ahead and draft. We'll just go ahead and draft our teams. So again, thanks for listening, and make sure to follow us on Twitter. Again, at the423football. We are the 423 Football Podcast. Peace out.
Peace.